Good morning, Rina.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Yeah, very happy to be with you in this interview. So let me first introduce you, and then we can start the interview. Okay. So for people watching this interview, Rina Dechter is a distinguished professor of computer science at the University of California at Irvine. She obtained her bachelor in mathematics at the Hebrew University, her master on applied mathematics at the Weizmann Institute, and then she obtained a PhD at UCLA, being advised by Judah Pearl. And her career related to constraint programming and other fields is long and very with a lot of impact. She's a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, for the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, and also for the Association for Computing Machinery. She's the author of two books that most of the people in the community use in our lectures and have been influential in the community as well. So, so deserve a award when you obtain your award for the outstanding contributions to the community. And I hope your in this interview people will see like your perspective of the community, and also we learn something about your biography. Let me, before I'm start asking questions to you, to say in a few minutes how I met you. I don't know if you even remember when we met, but we met 30 years ago, precisely 30 years ago, because this is the 30th edition of CP, and we met in the first CP. It was CP 95 in a small town. Uh, One moment, sorry.
It was in France,
It was
south
in
of
France. In Cassis.
in Cassis, yes.
For me, it was very important uh, because it was my first. I had just started my PhD, uh, and uh, and it was my first paper, my first trip to a conference. I was there with Pedro Meseguer, my advisor. So we arrived to this small village. We left our luggage in the hotel, and then we went out for dinner. And we entered this restaurant, and there were this couple of people talking, and Pedro approached them. And these two people were you and Fahim Bacos. You were having dinner together, and
Mhm.
then Pedro introduced me to the two of you, and I have to say that I panicked. I said, "Okay, my first contact with the community, and I am having dinner with Fahim Bacus and Rina Dechter, two people that I had been following, that I've been reading your work." And I said, "Okay, they are going to discover right away that I am a stupid, dumb student, that they will not, I don't know so much about the topic. They will realize I had this, I don't know how is it in English, the impostor syndrome, this thing that you have this feeling that you will not reach the expectation of the people."
Mhm.
So I was scared, but after 5 minutes, I realized that had no reasons to be scared. You were so friendly, the two of you, Fahim and you were so nice to me. We start talking about anything but constraint programming, about things about our lives, and you include me in the conversation. And then I remember this dinner as having the feeling that I was so happy to have decided in my life to join the academic world, because I realized that the community was so friendly, and it was so nice to exchange ideas with people. And after that, I visited you several times, and so it was a very nice starting relationship with you. And I just want to say that this dinner was like the beginning of my career, and also the beginning of my friendship with you. And it has stuck in my mind as something important in my life.
Mhm.
Okay, having said that, let's start the interview.
Just let me respond that really thanks for sharing this. I have a vague, I can reconstruct my memory and can imagine the scenario. I think I have some faint memory of meeting you, and it's really exciting to hear how you perceive that. That's very nice that you shared that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to start the interview asking you about a little bit about your life. So maybe can you tell me a little bit about your childhood, your life as a child, about your family? What do you remember about that?
Okay. So I was born in Israel 2 years after Israel was born. So my life is intertwined with Israel's building itself as a nation. This was really a very exciting time to be in Israel. I had a very happy childhood, and we Israel kids who were born there felt like everybody appreciate us. I mean, the society was filled with people who came from Europe, from the Holocaust, my parents included, and had trauma of all sorts in their past. And finally, they are in Israel, fulfilling the Zionist dream and building a nation. And we, the children, were really cherished. I mean, because we represent the hope. And so it was really, even though Israel had enemies and the idea of fighting for our survival was in the air, it was really a very happy time for many of us. Um, we really, one of the things that we immediately adopted is the feeling that we are Israelis rather than primarily Jewish. I mean, we have now a new identity. We are no longer living in the diaspora, we are living in our own country, and we resume a different kind of breed. So I was, my parents were Holocaust survivors, as I said. So they came after the war. My mother was 2 years in Auschwitz, a concentration camp, and my father was he flew to Russia and spent the war there. He was a communist, so he went to places where communism was play. And both of them lost all their family, but they survived. And they went to Israel, and they are actually both from Poland, from the same town, Plonsk. And they met after the war and came back to Israel, married, and I was born 2 years after that Israel was born. And that's it. We lived in a small neighborhood in Netanya, city of Netanya, which is near the beach. In
Is that a city or
It's a
is
city.
urban? Okay.
It's a city. It's smaller than Tel Aviv. It's in between Tel Aviv and Haifa on the Mediterranean coast. Definitely a beach town centered around tourism and other industries, but tourism was important. My father had a restaurant near the beach in town, in the main street, and a restaurant, then coffee shop, then gift shop. And my mother, when she came back, came from Europe, she studied nursing. She was a nurse for a few years, and then she helped in the restaurant. So the life was, my parents worked primarily in the summertime. The life was really centered around. There was a feeling of freedom because nobody thought that there was any danger of kids being in the streets. We went to school. We played in the neighborhoods without any supervision with kids. In the summertime, I would go to the restaurant and play with kids there. We ride bicycles and go to the beach, and it was a really good life.
Hmm.
I mean, happy life. We didn't feel that we didn't have a lot of money. There were no really toys, but we felt good.
Hmm.
And school was like a regular school. We had the teachers that came from Europe, good teachers, and that's it. Yeah.
So no connection with your family had no connection with the science, academia.
No. So my mother, so my father was almost, he always pride himself by saying that he only accomplished 3 or 4 elementary school classes, and he was on in the Volga River, and he was a autodidact. He read a lot. He was very political person, read history and educated himself, but almost no formal education. And my mother was far more educated. She went until first 2 years of high school, and then the war erupted, and she had formal education, but both of them went is my mother in particular to Jewish school in Plon. So they went to a school where they spoke. It was a Zionist
Hmm.
town. Plons, where they live, was a Zionist town. Ben Gurion, who was the first prime minister of Israel, is from that town. And they learned in the Hebrew school and learned in Hebrew. This was Talmud schools. So everybody was geared or educated towards going eventually to Israel. This was before the war started. So Zionism started far before the Second World War. And so family, we had my mother. There was one sister. My mother had five. There were five kids. One sister came to Israel as a Zionist before the war. The rest perished in the Holocaust. So actually, in 1997, I went with my parents and my sister to Poland with my father and mother to go and visit all the places. And after that, we have a recording of my mother telling about her story. This is a Spielberg project of videotaping the survivors. And I always uh, send it on Facebook when the Holocaust Remembrance Day every year. I send it and share it with people on Facebook. So we had no family. My mother had one sister left. My father also had one sister. They also were a family of four, uh, three actually, I think. And he lost his brother and father, but his sister was able to hide in France and survive. So we had one aunt from one side, each side, and only one cousin. And
Okay.
so I have one sister, and we grew up, and many families were like that in Israel. But there was a feeling of the general community, of a family, of the general people were close to each other, very close.
Mhm.
So that was a replacement, I would say.
Okay, and so after you
You
were a child,
talked about science, no education, no history of academia.
so when did you realize that you were like a good student and that you were when did you become attracted to science, to mathematics? Because probably with parents that were not that didn't have such a background, it was you that had to discover this interest in your life. So was it you discovered it early in your life, or it was when you became older?
Yeah. So, in general, there was a admiration to education. This is part of the Jewish culture. So, everyone was interested that their kids will be good students. And I was immediately, I mean, from earlier age, I was attracted to numbers and to math. This was elementary school. I remember thinking about numbers, counting, and I was very good in just arithmetic. And when I went to school, elementary school, I was a good student, especially in math. You get feedback, and I enjoyed it. So I knew that this is the subject that I love the most. I was also good in other subjects, humanities, but definitely it was immediately obvious to me that this is what I like and what is relatively easy for me. So this was elementary school, and then when we moved from elementary school to high school, um, accomplishments are even more important. So, and I was always in the best classes. I already had an image, self-image as a good student. I was in classes that were for students that were ranked higher. And then in the when I was in the 17 and 18, I mean, towards the end of high school, the last 2 years, we had concentrations for in particular subjects, and there was a concentration in math and physics, and I was in that moved to that concentration. So I spent the last 2 years in this focus or concentration. And so it was always obvious that that is my calling, mathematics, statistics we didn't learn in high school, but and actually physics I didn't like that much, but chemistry I just it was just easier and fun.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And in parallel to that, did you develop any hobbies, anything that you remember from these days that you enjoy doing, or you were just focused on studying and getting good grades and so on?
No, I definitely had hobbies, quite a few hobbies, also from early age. From early age, I really liked the dancing and I really liked singing. And I was entertained. I was also good in sports, and I entertained the thought of being an actress or a dancer. So I thought about being a dancer seriously. Actress a little bit. I entertained it more in high school. I loved all this. So I mean, the things that gave. I mean, I always danced, and I also. I mean, in elementary school, I was in choirs, and also the teachers. I mean, gave me always good feedback on and teachers and the environments, parents. So these hobbies, I had a friend where we would sing in harmony and perform in elementary school. One girl in our neighborhood, my best friend, and we would harmonize and perform. And dancing, I joined later on when I was, I think, in eighth grade. I joined a folk dancing group in Natania, and I think it was maybe a high school or a end of elementary school. But this folk dancing team was really very central to my life at that time because we, first of all, we had a very good instructor who was a professional dancer, and we choreographed folk dancing dances, and also it was a social group, and we had parties, and we performed. We performed in front of soldiers in vacations. We performed in front of retired people in vacation home, and we performed in holidays. So one thing, I mean, that holidays were very important and celebrated in school. So the Jewish religious, I mean, the main manifestation of it in the secular school. So we were in the secular school was the holidays and the stories about Israel. Um, I was also quite playful and mischievous kid.
Hmm.
I did all sorts of things that are looked problematic. Not problematic, but so one thing is that we didn't have supervision, a lot of supervision. My parents worked very late hours until not 2 a.m. They put us to bed at 7, 8, but we didn't stay in bed. They went and worked, and we would go to the neighborhoods, and we would go, and there was, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm not diverging, but there was a vacation home for soldiers in our street. And in the summer, every week, there was a different group that was vacationing, and they brought all sorts of shows for these soldiers. And we, the kids in the neighborhoods, would late at night, I mean, late, like 9 p.m., 8 p.m., 7, uh, and we would go and try to sneak in, and our parents didn't know, presumably didn't know that, and we spent time there. So this was really exciting. And there were other things that we did that because we were not that supervised, that when I'm looking back on them now, I think that this, I would be really shocked if my kids did this. Yeah. Um, there is one anecdote that I like to tell my kids. Tell me if I'm going to.
No, no, please, please.
There's one anecdote to tell you how we were, that may be telling something about the times. I mean, my parents have never did birthday parties for me. they just were. I mean, I'm in August. This is summertime. They were too busy. They didn't even think about it. But other kids have had birthday parties, and that I would go from time to time. And at some point, I was very unhappy that I've never had a birthday party. So I think it was, I don't know, maybe 11, 10, 11 or 12, I don't remember. I decided I will have a birthday party. I went and invited all the kids in the neighborhood for a certain time and day. And then I told my mother, they are coming, you have no choice. And I had my first birthday. So I remember that.
Uh, nice anecdote. So maybe we can move on to your college life. So you made your bachelor at the Hebrew University. Did you have to move out of your house, or you could stay with your parents?
Um, just one thing to mention before we leave the high school is that I met my husband in high school.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was in July so early.
Yeah, so when I moved to the focus of the math and physics focus in the last two, we were in the same class from the whole high school period, but there was nothing between us the first 2 years. And then when we moved to the concentration on math, he also was assigned there. He met me in the street one day, and we were living not very far from each other, and said and asked me if I will sit next to him next year.
That's
I
romantic.
said, yeah, and we didn't know each other beyond, and I said yes. I thought, well, he was a good student, why not? And that's how it started. So I'm just mentioning that.
So how old were you? You were like,
So we were as of 16, 17 when you go to this grade. I had a boyfriend in from the folk dancing group at the time. So this was, and then I sat next to Avi, and it developed. Not immediately. It took maybe a year or half a year. Yeah,
mhm,
but we became friends. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So going, you ask about college. What did you ask about? How was it in college where we lived? So I wanted to study math in college, and it was. I managed to convince my parents to allow me to go to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, namely to leave home. Because if I had studied in Tel Aviv, it would mean I would stay. Netanya is not far from Tel Aviv, it's 45 minutes. It would mean that I'm staying home. I didn't like this idea. I wanted really student life, and Jerusalem was known for student life. So I went to the Hebrew University, which meant they had housing for students. So I went, first year I lived in student housing on Scorpius Mountain in Jerusalem. And I lived in student housing until I got married, because I got married during college. But you missed a period. Now I realize I went to the army before
Oh,
college.
it was before college. Okay, so
Yes,
you were very young then.
yeah. Everybody is going to the army age 18.
18. Okay, and it
18
was
after high school. After high school, you are going to the army. That's the normal path.
and you couldn't delay it because in Spain, when army was mandatory, people that were following an academic life, they could ask for delays until they finish the degree.
Yeah.
And,
So
and the
it's
other thing is that for me, what is surprising that it was also mandatory for women at that time. At least in other countries in Europe, the army was for men.
yeah. So in Israel, it was different. First of all, so everyone has to go to the army, and the normal time is immediately after high school. I mean, there is all these stories. I mean, religious people can be exempt, and the Arab citizens are not going to the army. But everyone else has to go, including women. And there is an option of going to college before. Yeah, it's called Atudai, that's the Hebrew name, and Avi did it. So there is this route. Good students can ask to delay the army to go and study in college and serve afterwards. And then when they serve after they finish their degree, they will have to to give back more time. Instead of serving just 3 years, they have to serve 5 years. And Avi took this route, but it was not a very common route. And for women, it didn't make as much sense because women had less service time. It was just 20 months and not 3 years. And you're not normally, at that time, there was no thinking about fighting. Right now, you have women who really go to the fighting force. It was a task. You were supposed to do things that were also perceived to be exciting. So, I mean, the society going to the army was a melting pot and an excitement in it, in addition to the risks if there is a war. But during the time that there is no war, it was a period of service that was mandatory. And most women that serve went directly. So I went directly to the army, and this was a very interesting time. I was sort of a captain. I don't know, training a new women that comes to serve for 2 months, and there was this was my task. It was we learned how to shoot and teach how to shoot, but we didn't participate. We taught first aid, we taught all sorts of tasks that perceived to be relevant. And socially, it was also an interesting time. But this was just sort of a break between high school and college, and most youth went to this break. Um, and then I went to college, to Hebrew University.
Okay, so then you go to college, you marry Abby
Yeah,
halfway
after
through your bachelor, and then you started living together right away, and
yeah. So I was, I mean, one important element in my college life was again being part of the folk dancing, university folk dancing team. And we went, this was both social, and we went abroad and we performed. And with Avi, I mean, we were already friends. After a year, after my first year, we decided to get married. This was after we did a trip on our own to Europe, and we decided we want to be together. In order to be together at that time, you have to get married. So we got married, and I was a student while I was married. We had a small flat that we rented, and I finished my my college degree in math and statistics. And Avi was at that time already in. Once he finished Technion, he went to serve in the army, and then so that was that. And then I continued. I decided I want to continue studies. I went to the Weizmann Institute.
well,
Yeah.
and at the Weizmann Institute, well, I think it was one of the top academic institutions of the world at that time. It was like, well, it's a very the reputation of the institute is very good. So, what was your impression when you arrived there and you had such a level of education? What do you remember about that?
Yeah, I remember when for me this was a period that I had to be separated from Jerusalem. I didn't like it that much. I really so it was a period of separation from many friends that and then when I went because Avi served in Tel Aviv and we wanted to be closer together. In terms of the institute, it was like the feeling was that you are abroad. It was very different from many other places. It was small. It's only a graduate institute. There are no undergraduate there. Everything is green and peaceful and nice. This is in Rehovot, in a city near Tel Aviv. And in terms of education, I went. We were small group of students that took all the classes in math, applied math, and there was computer science also there. And there was this computer, and it was one of the first places in academia that started in the computer science education. I took a class, but I was in general fearful of programming, and I decided I want to stay in applied math and not really go to computer science at that time. And that's what I did. And I finished actually, my master degree was, I just looked it up in epidemic theory. I mean, stochastic processes characterizing epidemic theory and differential equations, something like that.
And then after that, you decided to go to the United States. How
No,
was it?
no, no. So I always didn't know what would be my next step. It was not clear to me. I mean, where do I end? I mean, I didn't know. I knew that I like what I'm doing, and that I would like the next step to be interesting and good. So the master was really a natural extension. It was not commitment to anything yet, practical in terms of what I will do in life. And then when I finished my master, I wasn't sure what to do exactly. I was exploring the potential of doing PhD, but I didn't have the confidence that I can do PhD.
Oh,
I didn't at all. I remember I asked my professor, do you think I can do it? And he said that he thinks I can. So I explored the potential of doing it in the Weizmann Institute in applied math, and somehow at that time was the Open University. Open University started in Tel Aviv. I heard about it. This is an institute where you write the material. The students are learned by, I mean, from far, and they have materials, and the task is to develop written material. And this appealed to me, and I joined the Open University in 1975 it was. And also, but at that time we also moved to our own flat, our own condo near Tel Aviv. Our parents helped us buy this place, and I already had my first son. So in 74, 75, I had my first child, and I worked at the Open University developing material in math. And still thinking, but it's still, I was restless, not knowing how to continue. And Avi wanted to go abroad for study. So Avi also wasn't sure exactly what his path would be. And finishing his service after 5 years, he did some master degree in management and thought about the next step. And he decided, like others in Israel, to explore doing PhD abroad. It was a common thing because it felt like an opportunity to go out of Israel that is so claustrophobic. Everybody around is enemies. You cannot go anywhere on the ground. I mean, you have to fly to Europe. That's or by sea. So there was a feeling of claustrophobic feeling, and youth wanted to explore the world. And this was a way of exploring the world, going to the United States to study. He started this process, and I in parallel thought about other things, and then I decided, okay, he will go if he will be admitted, and we already had a child, and we will see. And we didn't have any income, we but the reason to go was because we wanted to go for a few years, explore the world, and for him to study, and maybe I will do this and that. I wasn't sure. Maybe I will start later on, and maybe I will find a job that can help us. So we went in 78. He was admitted to UCLA, to the business school. And we went to Los Angeles and lived in the merit student housing after a while. Before that, we rented. And I was looking for a job, and as a waitress, I taught Hebrew in a synagogue for very little money. At some point, I met somebody, and there was this company, Perceptronics, that was involved in high tech, getting grants from the government and doing all sorts of things. And one of the CEO was Israeli, and some of the workers were Israelis. And somehow they hired me, and I started to work there in developing models. I did what they asked. It
Hmm.
was statistics, and this was an interesting period. I had I already had a 4 years old child, and became pregnant with my second child. And at some point, they wanted to fire me because they had and I was the only one who were making money in the family. And they thought, well, they had difficulty getting grants, and they started laying off people. And they thought, oh, a woman pregnant doesn't need to work anyway. They fired me, and this was one of the darkest days in my life. I remember. I cried, and they took me back. They took me back, but at that time I started to think more seriously about PhD at UCLA. I took external courses and I enrolled. I also met Yuda Perl at that time because some of his students were working in that company, and he visited and made a contact with him. And so I enrolled. And when I had my second child, I was prepared to leave them. They fired me again, but at that time I was prepared to leave, and I started my PhD at UCLA.
Okay, so your arrival to the world of computer science was a little bit accidental. It was life that took you there.
No, yeah, it's accidental, but I knew that I like mathematics. I knew that doing PhD in mathematics, first of all, I didn't know I didn't perceive myself as being able to be a mathematician. I didn't think I'm strong enough. So I knew that I like it, but there is a limit. And I have to find a way of doing applied stuff so that after I study, I will have some work outside the university. So I thought about computer science as a way of doing it, and that's why I enrolled in computer science. Yeah, but my advisor, well, I still was looking into areas that were more mathematical and less applied, less requiring programming. And I ended up working with Len Klein, Professor Kleinrock, who was very famous in computer networks. And this was the area that was perceived at that time as really pragmatic, practical. There will be a lot of demand once I'm finishing. And also, the studies were very theoretical. He was doing computing, queuing theory as models for computer networks, and it really fits my skills. So I felt I can do it, I can be strong in that. And my first 2 years at UCLA were in that concentration. We were a group of 5, 6, 7 Israeli students sticked together, socially lived in the same area, the Merit Student Housing, and some of them were in the same concentration of computer networks and still are. But I took also AI from Yuda Pero. And after 2 years, I started to really rethink what I want to do for my PhD thesis, and eventually decided to move to work with Yuda. And I did my PhD under his guidance.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit about your relation with Judah and his group of students? How was the academic life? Do you have seminars? What kind of life do you have while doing your PhD?
Yeah, so Yuda didn't have many students. So, I mean, this was completely a different time. That AI was not what it is today. Uh, eh, and he had a small group of students. He didn't do big social meetings. I mean, so he taught classes that we took. We had individual meetings with him. Uh, Hector Hector Geffner joined after a few years, and his ex-wife Maria after a couple of years or 3 years, I think, joined his group. There were Jean Kim, and a few other. I think I was one of the first students. Maybe Jean Kim was before me in AI. Before that, Yuda was focusing on uh, other uh, areas, and he just recently moved from another department to computer science. So it was a feeling that, I mean, it was exciting because the subject matter was very exciting. But you didn't see many people coming to his talk. I remember Avi and me going to a talk by Yuda at UCLA that was attended by 5 people. So there was also maybe I'm mixing things. It was exciting time in AI, but all the faculty were recruited after I started all the faculty in AI. So Rich Korf joined after I started my PhD in 1980. And later on he joined, and this was search, heuristic search. Yuda also was in heuristic search, and this was my thesis also in that area. Um, there were two faculty, Mike Dyer and Mark Flowers, came from Yale University, and this was Roger Shank time, where a big hyper focus on his approach for natural language processing, and everybody thought that this was the way. And there were these two teams at UCLA. Mike Dyer, he had many students, and Yuda, who had few. We felt as if we are not in the mainstream. I think always it was the case, but we went to Yuda and we asked him, and he was always very strong in his belief and what he was heading, and was not intimidated at all. But we always were not sure that we are in sharing the areas that people are excited about and where the main interest was. This was also the time for expert systems
Okay.
that started. And Bayesian, so while I was doing my PhD in search, he started Bayesian network. I sort of worked in parallel and didn't pay attention that much. And in 1985, we had the Ichkai in UCLA. And this was the height of expert system. So expert system was like what we see today. I don't know if you're familiar with it. The conferences were amazing. I mean, there was all these companies that were imagining that they will do a lot of money with expert system for this and that, and they invested in also in computers, specialized computers for Lisp and for languages. And when we had the conference, there will be the exhibits, and they would throw parties. They wanted to attract people. So in 1985, this was when I graduated. I finished my PhD. I had a paper, my second paper in a conference. And I remember this like happening. You had parties, dances, and also it was very important in terms of in academic terms. First of all, Freuder. I met Freuder for the first time there, and there was this um, what's his name? The cold guy. Forgot his name. From Harvard. There was this impactful paper on learning, theoretical learning, PAC learning,
Pack learning, yeah.
and there was the first conference on Bayesian network there. First UAI conference was in 1985. I attended it. I felt outsider. I wasn't in that area actually, and but we felt all these ups and downs. I mean, the down wave was a few years later, but there was this also at that time we had a second excitement about neural network. It started like in 1986. There was this excitement of back propagation and neural network and some applications. And we also, I myself, we thought about this area, how it's related to what we were doing and so on. but I'm diverging. So maybe you can focus me on the next question.
So tell me about your landing into the constraint programming, which at that time was not even called constraint programming, was CSP solving. So because
Yeah.
you were working on heuristic search, so how did you end up
Yeah.
in the field of CSPs?
Okay. Yeah. So my thesis focus in heuristic search was on how to make, we call it at that time, weak method strong. So the jargon at that time, there were this Nitti and Scaffy, and also another name was weak method and strong methods. Weak methods were general methods to solve all the problems, and they are weak because they are not using a lot of domain knowledge. The only way, I mean, in search paradigm that you use domain knowledge is in through the heuristics, the heuristic that you are using in search. So that was the methodology. So and the strong methods were all these systems that people built that were in the domain, but you couldn't generalize. And the expert system in particular, uh, some of the focus was on this kind of scruffy system, but there was also MySim and other programs that try to find the principles behind them. And Bayesian network was, or probabilistic reasoning emerged because you had, at that time, it was clear that logic by itself would not be sufficient. You had to represent and reason with uncertainty. So the expert system in medicine, in diagnosis, and in excavating oil, there was other expertise, immediately brought this need to the surface. So when I did my research, heuristic search was, I wanted to follow the paradigm introduced by Yuda, that how do we get heuristic? How can we mechanize heuristic? We mechanize heuristic by identifying or relaxing the problem and solving it in a polynomial algorithm, relaxing it enough until it becomes easy to solve, and use this solution as a heuristic to guide search. That was the framework, and the question was, how do you discover heuristic? How do you do the relaxation? And you want to do relaxation in order to have a greedy algorithm that can solve the problem. And my question was, how can we identify greedy? How do we know when a problem is greedy or not greedy? So I was focusing on trying to really advance the field in that paradigm of identifying easy problems, and easy problems are greedy. And I did some research on that. I have a paper trying to identify greedy problems. And then I saw further, and constraint satisfaction was part of the search problems. And I saw somehow, I don't remember how, I encountered Freuder's paper on vector-free search. And the title, vector-free, immediately told me this is what I'm looking for, because I want a greedy. Vector-free is greedy. That's and so I delved into Freuder's paper, and this took me to Montanari. It took me to Alan Mackworth. All this work, I read very eagerly all these papers, and I immediately saw that this is relevant. And I think my first paper is called has easy problems, is a constraint satisfaction problem. So these were the trees, but not only trees, with two problems. I built on Freuder's notion of width and introduced induced width, and actually implemented this idea of generating heuristic within the constraint satisfaction framework. And from there, I continued later on. But this was the route. The route was always to identify tractable problems and to use them in solving hard problems. And the constraint satisfaction was the first framework that facilitated that, using the structure of the graph.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, but then with this direction in your research. Again, I think your life takes you now. You will explain it to me, but you also took a break in your academic life because you worked for a aircraft company for a few years, and then you returned to Israel for some time. So again, a change in
Yeah,
your.
so so once when I finished my PhD, I didn't know, I wasn't sure that I can go, that it makes sense, or that I wasn't sure I'm good enough, or I'm ready, or I didn't know what academic life is. So I didn't know if this is, if I can do it. I didn't know if I can do it. I just did PhD and it was really great. I liked it, but that's what I did. And we also knew that we want to go back to Israel. This was all an adventure to go to see the world and come back. And leaving Israel, yeah, I mean, was always something that Israelis struggled with. I mean, there was a stigma that you are a deserter if you are leaving Israel. I mean, this is a country that is trying to, from scratch, to build itself. And now that we have it, we are deserting it. And it was known that you sacrifice to be in Israel. You have to go to the army, you have to do all sorts of things. So leaving Israel was not perceived as something nice. And also, we didn't want. We really, I mean, we left all our family in Israel, my parents, Avi's parents. So we wanted to go back to Israel. So it was not clear how we are doing all that. And we decided that eventually we will go back to Israel. So I didn't, I mean, and I flirted with the idea of going to academia at UC. I actually explored it. But somehow I don't remember how it happened that I knew about US aircraft. They had an AI lab, and I thought this is really a great thing to try. And I applied. I was accepted, got a job there in the AI lab. But I also applied for fellowship. There was Presidential Fellowship of California for promising students, especially for women and minorities, to try to help. And I received this fellowship for 2 year postdoctoral. So I combined, I mean, with Yuda, I mean, he supported me on that. So I was both a postdoc working with in Yuda's lab for 3 more years, 2 years under this fellowship, and 3 years I was able to get only part-time job at US Aircraft. I
Mhm.
worked in both places for 3 years. And when I was there, this was my first industrial experience. They developed, the AI lab was focused on developing automated driverless car.
Okay.
Yeah, it was already at that time driver. There was a small car and people programmed it. There was students from in AI and in vision from various universities, including myself. It was a very interesting and exciting time. But I just, I mean, I didn't know exactly how to fit. And what I did, I just continued my research, but I focused on programming. I decided if they will see something working that should fulfill, I'm doing good stuff in AI. I continued to work in search. I developed the learning from dead ends, the search with when you learn from dead ends, shallow learning at
Mhm.
that time, and wrote programs in Lisp. And I thought it was working well, but I basically worked with myself and with Yuda for feedback. And after a few years, when they had difficulties in their funding, they laid me off.
You've been light up a few times in your life.
The second time, at that time, it was okay with me. I mean, I could work with Yuda, but we already had real concrete plans to go back to Israel. And we went back, so it was 3 years after and it was excellent time for me. This was time that I didn't have any pressures. I mean, I just did what I wanted without thinking about the pressure from academia. It's like postdocs for 3 years. And it was essential because I discovered to myself that that's what I want to do, that I'm able to do it. I published in conferences, and this is what I want to do. So when we went to Israel, I applied to the Technion, and I got a job at a position at the Technion, and we went to Israel. I was my first academic job was in the Technion in the computer science department, and Avi already was working at Cal State Northridge, and he took leave, and he hoped to find some job in Israel. First year he couldn't find anything. It was really difficult periods economically. Second year he found a job in a company, and I was in the Technion. I was very happy there. It was very difficult. It was my first realization what academic life mean. And in
Okay.
Israel, I
Is it the
had
first time that you had to teach courses for the first time?
yes, but it was not. I mean, teaching. I mean, I had three kids.
Oh,
I had three kids, age 13, 8, and 1 year old, and facing all the life in Israel, which is much less comfortable with not big salaries. It's going back is hard after you experience certain a nice environment in the United States. So there were also working full time, and finding arrangements for your kids was more difficult. And so there are many things to really struggle with. And in addition, first academic job, it was tough because many things are demanded from you, and you have also teaching, of course, and also you have to do everything that you have to do, and you have a limited amount of time. And the hard thing was I had only from 10 to 4, I think, or from 9 to 4. That is, I couldn't work more than that, and I was really I developed a, a tendency to really guard myself from any disturbances. I kept my door closed. It was not very popular. I mean, faculty needs to open the door. And I wrote, please do not knock, email me. It was, people understood it, but I remember this started to establish my general tendency to really secure the time that I have because it was so little. But it was really exciting. I mean, for me, I mean, I liked what I did, and I was successful. But after 2 years, it became clear to Avi that he is not really able to find the right job for himself, and if we wouldn't come back, he would lose the position in Cal State Northridge, and we decided to go back.
okay. And when you decided, you already had some guarantee that you would find a position at UCI, or you again you came without any plans and
I came without any plan, but
okay.
I knew one thing. I knew that I can work, I can join Yuda's lab and I work as a guest professor. I mean, with some salary, like a visitor. So that I knew that I will be able to. So and that is what was on my mind to start working there and then to start looking. But I always had the issue that I didn't want to move from Los Angeles. So looking would be, and actually now I remember that I applied to USC. I forgot about it. Anyway, I can either go to USC or to UC Irvine. There are no other options. I mean, UCLA I knew will not take me back because they had this policy of not hiring their own. And anyway, I that was the issue. But something happened on the way. So I visited the Toronto University in May before we came back and met, what's his name? Ah, San Diego. Uh, it will come back to me. I met a colleague who
Mhm.
applied both to UC. It's annoying when you don't remember name. And he was also in transition applying to universities, and he applied to UC Irvine and to UC San Diego. I met him in Toronto when I gave a talk. I met, this was very exciting visit, and he told me that he got this very good offer from UC Irvine, but also got a very good offer from UC San Diego. He is going to go to UC San Diego. And he told me, since they already give me an offer, try, ask them, and maybe they will take you instead. So I already knew that he's declining. I wrote to Dennis Kibler at the time, and they said, well, maybe it's still possible for me to apply. This was May, and they say yes, come and give a talk, and they gave me his package. I wouldn't know how to negotiate the same package that he got. I mean, this was an amazing package, but it was flexible at those years. I mean, there weren't that many AI candidates, and they gave me an offer, and I joined UC Irvine. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it's a fun story. It's very vivid. I really, it's disturbing that I don't remember his name. Charles Elkans.
Oh,
Charles Elkans.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So now I would like to. Okay. So when you arrive to UCI, then you stay there, and you have stayed there for 30 years already. So that
Yeah.
you finally you settled
So,
down
yeah,
after.
in 1990, I started at UC over 1990 until today. It was really not easy. I mean, I remember having academic career and three kids, and even in the United States, it was difficult. But it was at that time. At some point, I gave a talk at the CP for doctoral students about how it was 2003 in how to uh, be academics and have kids at the same time. And I gave them a talk to the doctoral students, to the female doctoral students mostly. And I remember that my main advice for them or lesson that I learned is that you have to have a good partner. Without a good partner, without somebody who supports, it's very hard. It's impossible. You need to have an understanding husband partner and that take some of the responsibilities
Okay.
also.
Good advice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I
Okay.
was there for many years. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now I would like to maybe the second and final part of the interview to talk to you a little bit about your opinion about in retrospect about your career, the contributions that you have done, and your opinion about the field and so on. So first of all, I would like to ask you about if you think about your the all the things that you have done, how would you explain them to you? Imagine that we meet right now, and you need to tell me in a few minutes what have been your contribution. What which are the things that you would emphasize, and how would you explain your contribution to constraint programming? If you want, I can give you my opinion about.
Okay. Yeah.
I have followed your research
Okay.
in the last
Okay.
30 years.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
so if I had to explain your contributions to somebody in the field, I would say that you have gone through different periods that make a lot of sense sequentially, but I think they can be identified. First of all, while you were doing your PhD and your first years in the was working with CSPs, you were doing using the ideas of heuristic search, essentially backtracking, how to arrange search in a feasible way. Then slowly, but you made a transition towards the use of or the exploitation of a structure in CSPs, and then you realize that an alternative to to search when you exploit a structure is to move towards dynamic programming. And these years were all the years in which you developed the idea of bucket elimination, mini buckets, which essentially is instead of search doing reasoning or doing dynamic programming from an algorithmic point of view, and you have many papers about that. And then in your third period, I think you exploited, you develop the combination of these two things. You realize that dynamic programming is not an alternative to search, but that you can join the two of them and try to get the best of each world. And then it's all your papers about understanding the search spaces, the and search space, the and or search space, in which essentially you are doing a search. You solve problems with search, but because you can memorize some information that you have obtained, you are doing something similar to dynamic programming in a search fashion. And then in the last years, what you have done essentially is to move from the optimization problems to more sophisticated and more complex reasoning tasks.
Okay.
Do you think
So
that this story
yeah,
makes
it
sense to
is,
you?
but the way it is in my mind, the way I see, is the heuristic search remains the main framework. In my so heuristic search was the main framework. It's a very general framework, and things are related to it in a particular way. So I mean, discovering heuristics and going through the tractable classes remains the main thing. So when you go to constraints, you have the constraint programming, which is the particular properties that we have with constraint, that we can generate or we can solve easy problems by constraint propagation, and we can characterize different constraint propagation and their relationship to the structure, which Freud started. And what led me to the dynamic programming is that, again, I wanted to generate heuristic by doing directional consistency, because not too much effort for the generation of heuristic. This led to directional consistency, ultimately to adaptive consistency, which is the ultimate one. And I discovered it, and then I discovered that it was discovered before. And I discovered that this is actually dynamic programming, that what I discovered is dynamic programming, and that it generalizes to optimization. I mean, and it's generalized also to optimization. And also I discovered at the same time the 3D composition. So the move to this, almost everything was born in my thesis work. The dynamic programming was there very early. Bertele, Brioche, and their work, and Montanari, and what was a break. And then I wanted to continue exploration. What was a breakthrough when I was starting to teach also Bayesian networks. So when I teach, I learn. That's the best way
Yeah,
to
that's
do stuff. And while in 1996, I taught Bayesian network, and I discovered that I can do the Bayesian inference by the same algorithm, and I then the bucket elimination algorithm, which is the generalization, and that was a breakthrough to me. But it was always in my mind that these are methods that they can solve the problem if you have memory, but if not, you need to use them to generate heuristics for the real search framework. So after I discovered bucket elimination, the limits was the induced width for all this work. And what drives me is generality. I think I have this mathematical inclination. I love this generality and elegance. So I was looking for principles always. And then with bucket elimination, I said, okay, there is constraint directional eye consistency that can help search. What will be the corresponding things for bucket elimination? This moved me into mini bucket elimination. So it was just constraints guided me in developing ideas into the more general framework of more general tasks, realizing that you cannot carry it fully because constraints have special properties. But I mean, the mini bucket was to generate heuristics, for search in order to solve optimization problems in all sorts of Bayesian network or other, in graphical models in general, and also for maybe approximation for summation queries. This entered later on, but that was it. And then I think uh, there was to the and or search. I moved because of realizing some work again by Freuder and Bayardo and Mirenkar. When he showed, Freuder showed that you can do search on trees. I think he did it in for trees. You can also do search in a tractable way, and he had this pseudo tree definition.
Hmm.
When I saw that, and I think it was also the work of Bayardo and Mirenkar, I said, well, this is and all, and I'm coming because I'm coming from search. The terminology of search, the and or search spaces, and all this framework is in my blood, and it was exciting to me to realize that I can talk about it in those general terms and then generalize and have and or search in constraint satisfaction. So and or search was existed in the heuristic search framework. It was a known. And in Nielsen's book and Perro's book, I mean, this is a concept I used to teach in in general, and putting it in constraints and in graphical model was really exciting and very general. Immediately I saw how it all generalized, and I mean, the memory thing, and also I was looking to understand what is the difference then between search and dynamic programming, and realize that it's not different in some way. It's different, but not fully different. So we have a paper showing that it's can be, if you're doing search with memory, it's sort of you're searching for in a different direction than dynamic programming. So I think what excited me is understanding and making connection between various things on one end, and pushing forward. But it's all, if I'm thinking about it, it's all the same framework, the framework of heuristic search with heuristics to push it as much as we can. At some point, I realized that we cannot push it enough,
Hmm.
and sampling came in when I started to think about summation query. So instead of searching with heuristic, we sample with heuristic. So sampling the search space. So the next extension, advance, was to use sampling instead of searching.
Hmm.
And recently I have, and I have this end or sampling methods and cut set sampling methods. So I think the main tool I use, you're right, definitely right. The main tool I use is the graph structure, which is a strength and limitation because you can do only so far with the graph structure. There are
Hmm.
other properties of the functions that are important and need to be exploited. And there is other work that is focused on that. But I think I pushed both into going into approximation schemes. And the idea is to have approximation schemes that are anytime. When you can, you solve them exactly fast. If not, approximately, if you have time, you can, and memory, you can solve them exactly. So this is the general paradigm. But from searching to sampling and heuristics are based always on, started from dynamic programming, from bucket elimination. And they don't have to. Actually, you can have other variations.
Hmm.
And from sampling, and I wanted to go to more complex stacks. So marginal map, the focus in more recent years is on marginal map, which is more complex, and on influence diagram, which is more complex. But the idea is to use the same principles and or search with weighted mini bucket becomes weighted mini bucket if it's summation, and cost shifting and so on to make that's so I don't know if I'm telling a different story, but that's how it is.
No, it's interesting, interesting,
Yeah.
and I think one of the interesting approaches that you have done. Well, I think I found very interesting this idea that you mentioned that for you, research is understanding, understanding things, and when you understand is when you really make progress because you are the first one understanding connections between fields, and I think it matches also very much with my understanding of my personal view of research. And one of your contributions is that you have understood the connection between many things that have been done in different fields,
Yeah,
in particular between invasion networks or probabilistic graphical models and CSPs or even SAT,
yeah,
CNF formulas. In fact,
yeah.
the title of one of your books is I have it here. The book is Reasoning with Probabilistic and Deterministic Graphical Models. And deterministic graphical models is something that is not so common in
Term.
artificial
It's
intelligence,
not.
but you made it very clear that there are many things that are deterministic graphical models.
Mhm.
Uh, so, and related with this connection that you help us to discover, I wanted to ask you a question because if we think about constraint programming, we have seen that constraint programming has benefited a lot with the connect with i- work done in the SAT field and even work done in linear programming, but I think not so much with work done in probabilistic graphical models. And the connection, I think, you have shown that is clear. Do you have any explanation for that? Why SAT and integer programming have become more impactful in constraint programming than work done in probabilistic graphical models?
So let me make sure that I understand the question. So SAT and linear programming
Or
became
yeah, they can also be seen as the graphical models. Essentially, they are.
they are, but it's a good question. So, I mean, they focus on the representation, the closal representation. In the case of SAT, which is just a different representation of constraints, but it definitely took the field in a direction of developing solvers that are effective and more efficient. And also, so I don't, constraint programming is, the question is what does this term means? In some one way, one meaning could be the languages associated, the languages developed in order to express constraint problem, and this was developed more in the CP framework. I mean, the notion of languages, and using clauses as representation maybe was there or not. I'm not sure. Uh, eh, in parallel, there was this field of satisfiability that focused on developing good algorithm, and the language they use is clauses rather than tables. And these are two different representations, and we know that they can represent the same things, but the simplicity of SAT allowed this representation is more natural to represent, to express many problems, apparently. And also the communication between researchers is far simpler because the representation of the language is so simple. You can say what the problem is in less parameters in some way. And also it is more detailed, so it allows all sorts of development and data structures that are specific for this, that attracted researchers, and boom, you have all this work that became very influential, very good in solvers. In CP, they didn't manage, I think, to have the same impact with solvers. Why is that? I think in part what I said, in part more people were attracted to that and developed infrastructure. Developing tools infrastructure is hugely important. And there are some fields that are able to do it and they push forward. Neural network is one, but satisfiability is another. CP and probabilistic reasoning, they are the representation by tables somehow, I think, is not facilitating the same ease of use, and simply not enough tools were created to make it easy for more and more people to develop. I do think that there are cases where CP representation is more useful and so on than SAT representation. The same about linear integer programming. I think it's a very easy language. It's just binary. Most of the time, it's variables have two values, 0, 1, and you have just linear representation of the constraints and the objective function. So there is something simpler in the specification of the problem. And I think that specification level, the simplicity of specification level, facilitate more benchmark. It's clearer how to generate problems of real life. It's more natural because if in logic you have if then else that you don't have in CP, you have to invent it or to build on top of it. That's in general what I think about why there is more pushing forward in terms of solvers efficiency, both in integer programming and in satisfiability compared to CP solvers, and in particular, or more generally, to Bayesian network, where we assume that the basic assumption is it's tables, but the constraint probabilistic programming languages are different. They have if then else, they have a much more expressive language, and they have probability. So there is all this area of probabilistic programming and languages that is in the last 15 years developed. Stuart Russell has blog. Avi Pfeffer has, I forgot the name of the program. So, and we worked with those languages. So they are useful. I am unable to compare, but they are definitely useful. But in terms of algorithms, they are not very developed. They are doing primarily just sampling in order to solve the problem. I don't know if this
Yeah,
answers
yeah, yeah.
your
Of course.
question.
Well, we've been talking for an hour and a half, so I
Really?
think yes, I think so, right? Uh,
Yeah, okay, yeah,
so I think it should be time to maybe close this very interesting conversation that I have enjoyed so much. But
yeah.
I cannot finish the conversation with you without having knowing your opinion about what is coming in the future. You started in artificial intelligence in the early times of the field when it was completely unknown the directions towards this field was heading to, and now in the last 3 years you have witnessed the boom of artificial intelligence. Everybody talks about artificial intelligence. The impact of artificial intelligence is unbelievable. So I would like to have your opinion about how do you see the future of artificial intelligence.
So it was always the case that there was machine learning and reasoning, and machine learning was always even before the recent boom making a lot of impact, and there was some tension about the road, how those two fields interact. I think we are now, I mean, in a very exciting time. I mean, what the neural networks and large language models, what they are able to do is really amazing. But it has a limit. It has boundary. I mean, we don't know when the community will understand that we reached some boundary. So there are those who are talking about. I mean, we can do everything just with the same methodology of the large language models and neural networks. I don't. I belong to not surprisingly, to the community that thinks that this is a great advance, but it's just one part of the puzzle to generate a general artificial intelligence machine or entity. That's the vision of AI. And I don't think that you can do this without the notion of models. And by models, I don't mean like neural network. I mean, often they call LLM a model, or I mean, the traditional models of the world, models of the domain that we normally grew up on and subscribe to, and I am, that you have to represent knowledge and you have algorithms to reason with the knowledge. I still think that this framework is very central and necessary. So I think it's really exciting what we see, but there is danger. I mean, there is the danger that people point to of risks of AI to the jobs, to people doing bad stuff with the technology and notion of ethics. That's definitely real, and we need to find way of to be able to control what's going on, to make sure, like in other technologies, in biology, the DNA, people were trying to put some rules, so we will have to control that. In terms of the future of AI development, I am convinced that you cannot push only with this methodology. You need everything else that we developed. I mean, if you look at the book at AI, it has many chapters, only one or two are LLM, and all this, and people are bringing, I mean, we know the problems. All these systems are black boxes, no explanation. People will not use, except maybe language that they can converse with, they will not use things that they cannot explain. You cannot build on top of something that you have no idea how it fails, where it fails, what's the reason it fails. So I think we have an exciting advance, but all the rest of the work in AI, in reasoning, in modeling, graphical models, will have still have an important role, and we should continue the exploration.
Okay. And my final question is a similar question, but about constraint programming. We met 30 years ago in the first CP. Now we are celebrating the 30th anniversary. I think if we look back, we have witnessed a huge progress in constraint programming, maybe not so impactful as neural networks in the last years, but if we compare the problems that we were solving in 95 and the problems that are being solved now, the difference is huge. Remember the zebra problem that Patrick Prosser was using in his papers, the n queens, random problems. If you compare this with the problems we are solving now, is huge. So I think we can be proud of being part of this community and having made our contributions, and your contributions are out of question. And now, how do you see the continuation? Do you have any intuition, any opinion about that?
Uh, I think I don't. I mean, I don't have a clear vision. First, I didn't go. I'm not sure I'm on top of what's going on in Constraint because I didn't go very often to Constraint a conference in recent years. I sort of gravitated more to UAI, which exploit. I mean, there is a lot of room and appreciation I am having for constraints from the point of view of probabilistic reasoning, because there is a lot of determinism. And and the constraint work allow us to talk about it in an intelligent way and to know how to exploit it. So just a side note. So it's really important in the general framework of probabilistic reasoning as well, or optimization as well. In terms of the future, I think, I mean, it's similar to what's going on in probabilistic reasoning. I mean, there is a desire to see what you can. How the main issue with our approach of modeling is how to get the models. That's the bottleneck, and the large language models and neural networks overcome this because they learn it from data. So the focus is we have some resource that now it's available, all this data, and we can learn the model from data. We always thought about that. I mean, in Bayesian network, you think about how to learn the Bayesian network from data. In constraints, it's often you can also learn models from data, but I think that's The question is to what extent the new technology can allow us to overcome this bottleneck of the knowledge, representing the knowledge of the model, the knowledge of the problem that we are trying to solve. Sometimes it's obvious what is the problem that we are trying to solve. So one direction is to try and bring the technology in order to help us in this knowledge formulation of the problem. I don't know exactly how to do that, but that's direction. Another is in solving, I mean, compilation, neural networks, and people are doing it, trying to really see if they can compile, they can learn using these neural networks, some aspects of the problem solving. We are working on something like that. We have neuro bucket elimination, where we are just instead of doing mini bucket, we are just learning the message by a neural network, for example. So to try to exploit the technology within our own framework where we understand what is needed and we want to push forward how this technology can help us. Um, that's basically, I think, the main thing I can say. I don't know.
Okay. Okay. So I think I'm done with my questions. I really have enjoyed this having this long conversation with you, and I'm pretty sure other people will view the video and will enjoy listening to you. So I want to finish saying thank you to you for allowing me, giving me this opportunity for this interview. And okay, I just
Yeah,
want to
and
say
I would like to thank you for doing it. Yeah, it's
okay
very nice. And to thank Freuder for the idea.
organizing this. That's very nice.
It's
A
a
very
good
good
idea.
idea.
Yeah. And I mean, it was a pleasure to talk, and it's an opportunity for me to rethink what I
Okay,
did. It's good to really be able to go through it. Normally, we don't do it unless we write a biography, and I didn't think about it. So it
okay,
was an opportunity for me to think too, which was very nice.
excellent. I'm going to finish the recording. Okay,
Okay,
bye bye.
bye.